Is Shadab already online? For
Yes.
some reason, I'm not able to view. Okay, so let me start. Our topic is cloud security, and our topic is about what is new here and how the new normal is going to affect cloud security. And I am happy to begin by establishing a context. Cloud security, or as it is called as cloud computing security, refers to a whole discipline and practice of protecting information on cloud platforms. Now, uh, the cloud involves many things. What is most widely known are three kind of clouds: the public cloud services like an Amazon or Azure and similar providers. And then there are private clouds which enterprises set up, and then there are hybrid clouds which combine both public clouds and private clouds. And the kind of services that you can go for from each of the cloud environments include infrastructure, include platforms, and include software as a service. In fact, mm, there are many companies who have been born in the cloud. I mean, they started off on the cloud. And if you look at organizations who are today using cloud, there are mostly three kinds. Those who, as I said, were born in the cloud and they've been inherently using cloud as their platform. Then there are those who are who have migrated to the cloud from an on-prem deployment. They faced a different kind of challenge. They faced different kind of security issues and characteristics. Cloud, when it started, was not so much trusted, but over a period of time, we've learned to understand that cloud security is something which is inherently part of a cloud backbone or a cloud offering. And then there are those who are still grappling with moving to the cloud, and they're facing issues. Um, for example, shadow IT. How does it crop up in your company if you've got um, part on-prem and partly on the cloud? There are other businesses which are acquiring cloud services. The IT and IT security are facing challenges. There are those who have not understood the cloud platform itself and the responsibilities that the provider, the cloud services provider, and the cloud services consumer have, what the shared services risk models are, and how does that work. Then there are challenges of incompatibilities. There are technical challenges there. There is a facility called as multi-tenancy where you use multiple cloud capabilities for shared resources, which have many advantages, but then there are concerns about data isolation and data privacy and all that. Finally, there are malware and external attackers who are using cloud. Uh, but broadly, if I look at cloud security, there are four components I would put them into. Component number one is getting access to cloud. So there are technologies like CASB, which is Cloud Access Service Broker, and similar mechanisms through which organizations will get access to cloud. And then there are mechanisms. So once you have landed onto the cloud, there are challenges in securing the information that lies in the cloud. So which means you're talking about securing all the cloud components, the storage or the buckets, the containers, which have its own complexities. And then there are workloads, which are applications that you deploy on the cloud. You think about how these are interconnected, how the applications talk to each other, and what kind of security systems that you need to have in place to control them. And the last one are all the services that are offered from the cloud to enterprises for security. There are organizations who offer a VPN on the cloud. There are organizations that offer desktop on the cloud. So those are secure desktops, and so on and so forth. So that's the background of what me and Shadab are going to talk about. And hopefully, if Puneet joins in, she will contribute. Um, but without much ado, let me get to Shadab directly. Shadab, in your experience, what are the current cloud security challenges you see, and what enterprise, strategies and mechanisms that you've heard about which take care of all this? Hi, Puneet.
Hi.
Good that you joined. We just started off with the first question to Shadab, and I'll come back to you for the next part. Yeah, Shadab.
Yep. So answering that question, right? People who are migrating to cloud or people who are born in cloud and are using it, what they don't understand is like my general sense of what I've been speaking to leaders is they think cloud provide out of the box solution for everything. If we are on cloud, we are far more secure than our standard infra, which isn't the case, right? All the cloud providers work on shared responsibility model. They have given you, they have enabled you enough things that you have to turn on, tweak as per your requirement before just making sure you're secure, right? The biggest problem that we see of all the leaks, hacks that have happened so far in the last 3 to 5 years is because those controls were not put in place, right? That's the biggest problem that we haven't understood. Like AWS has a shared security model where they say, hey, we take care of these 3 things, and these 5 things is something you are responsible for, and here are the levers through which you could work on, which for which evangelization and teaching hasn't been done, right? Which is really critical, which leads to a lot of leaks that have happened over the past, right? Apart from that, things like misconfigurations, like things like unauthorized access, things like hijacking of accounts, because we have the lack of visibility of underlying infra, the network, right? Sometime people assume it's already taken care, or sometime the way we set up versus a traditional infra setup is different, which leads to a lot of problems that occur. Then the problem of external data sharing is completely uh, is out of our hands in terms of how things happen, right? We Because our physical boundaries are gone, right? The data privacy, the data governance concepts that exist have to be really understood, which are lacking in my understanding. Assume these scenarios are completely gone, right? Like people are like, hey, a breach happens, the cloud provider would take care of it. We need to look forward of how do we handle things like if there's an assuming that the breach has happened, like how will we handle the data loss, leakage, confidentiality across everything, right? Incident response is one major thing in cloud that needs to be focused on. Like I cannot emphasize on this much, because people for incident management haven't been trained on how to handle things on cloud, where you have certain things in control, where you have to work with certain pieces of the cloud provider, and having that BCPDR and incident management policy ready is something that's really important, which I feel is missing.
Hey, thank you. So, if I were to draw out, or rather cull out, the crux of what you talked about, I think the very first thing on every practicing security person or whoever is buying cloud services, the first security question on your mind should be, what are the shared services responsibilities that exist? What part of information security or cloud security would be done by the provider, and what is it that the organization or the cloud services consumer needs to do? And what are the mechanisms that are available to the cloud services consumer within the expenses that they signed up with to protect information?
Yes.
So, which automatically means that analysis should be able to tell them what are the additional elements they need to put in place to secure their information on the cloud. That's the first thing that I heard you say, which I'm absolutely with you. This is as simple as buying a service on-prem as well. But because people are focused about the shared services responsibility model in a on-prem deployment, and they're not on cloud, so therefore the strategy to go there.
Evangelization is missing there, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
if I have to just rephrase it in a shorter one-liner statement, I would say understanding your attack surface area, having a
Understanding
map
your
of that
attack surface.
would be
Yes.
the most important thing.
I think the second thing that you talked about, which stands out for any organization, whether they're on cloud or they're on premises, is to understand how would you and your organization react if there were to be an incident or a breach. who are your first responders? How would they respond? How could you convene a crisis management team or a war room to address that situation? Who are the people you can depend on for quicker support? And what additional capabilities have you got to, for example, harness information that is already leaked, whether it is done through a lawful an, and through the relevant authorities on the legal side, or through specialist organizations who have the ability to take down information on dark web or on social media and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Having said that, that let me acknowledge the fact that we have Advocate Puneet Bhasin online, and let me ask her in that case, Puneet, what is your experience in the legal and the quasi-legal aspects of adoption of cloud security, and how does that how do you see that working?
Good afternoon to all my panelists and the participants who are doing this session. See, I would say in my experience, what I have noticed, I pretty much resonate with what Shadab was mentioning. One of the key issues that I see, even from a legal perspective, is in India when we are taking third-party services, there is like an inherent belief and presumption that we are suddenly secure. So we believe in the concept in India of passing the burden on somebody else. So in an organization, passing off of liability, so that from a legal perspective, let's say if there's a third party I've engaged or outsourced it to them, which means the liability is theirs and not mine. So that's the kind of an Indian mindset. So we have actually evolved from being organizations who are completely taking responsibility for everything to big organizations which are outsourcing solely for the purpose of reducing liability. And that's a fact. So if you will ask any professional who's at a higher end, they would say the management needs to de-risk. That's the concept it's called. So the more we outsource, the more we de-risk because we're passing on the liabilities to third parties. But when you talk about data protection and cloud, first of all, in India, we have a concept where the data controller, the person who is the collector of data, irrespective of whoever the data processor is liable for any breach of data. Now, what does exactly mean? That even if I engage any third party, I may get any form of indemnification signed, which obviously all these organizations do that. The whole objective of outsourcing and not having one of the reasons of not having your own in-house services with additional investment is de-risking. So let's say there's an organization and they have a budget of let's say 50 crores. Now they have a budget in which they can set up their own cloud, but still they may choose to outsource the entire thing at maybe 1/4 the cost. The reason being not just the cost part of it, but also the part that they are de-risking themselves is the inherent belief that if something goes wrong, I'm going to catch hold of the neck of the person who's providing me this service. It's not my liability. Now, with respect to data protection, that option is not. So it is a data controller's liability. As a matter of fact, he's going to be penalized, and tomorrow he can file cases against the processors. So here the cloud service provider is a processor, and he can file cases to recover money from a processor. The same thing is there under GDPR, even under the Indian data protection law. So from a legal perspective, I would say that there is absolute liability to the person who is collecting sensitive data. From an organizational or an industry perspective, any organization which is dealing with sensitive data, by which I mean people's biometric information, account details, location details, something which is sensitive information, they should ideally refrain from shared cloud services. They should be able to have absolute control of data on their own because you don't want a lapse happening from a processor's end and the full liability of crores falling upon you. So you can have better control over your own data as compared to giving it up to three other people or five other people, and then having no check upon them of what happens to your data. So the ultimate liability, if let's say there's an employee level lapse, there's a system level lapse of a data processor of a cloud service provider, the liability is still yours. So in certain cases, it's not advisable to have shared services here. In certain cases, it's advisable where the data is not that sensitive. Then in that case, definitely the risk factor is comparative.
Thank you. In fact, you've elaborated on that point a lot more than what we started off with. But just so that everybody is clear, let me put on the table what is it that you can expect from most cloud service providers. So things like the physical network, the place where you store the data, or rather the space that you hire to store the data, and the space where you're going to set up your application. All these are the liability, or these are the areas that a cloud service provider needs to protect. This shared services responsibility model, which provides for two different responsibilities, includes what an organization, what a cloud services consumer needs to take care of in terms of the next level, which is the security of the application itself, the security of the information that lies within the application, and thereby going to what Puneet was saying, understanding what part of that you're going to outsource, because you could even outsource that part to somebody else, right? And understanding what your liabilities are. At the end of the day, the cloud security challenge that I believe that needs to be understood, it has to be understood in its totality. I mean, there are even international bodies which are coming up and guiding organizations on how to do this. There is enough information freely available on the internet, and for those who are interested, you can also look up some international standards that are proposed by like Cloud Security Alliance, and which has a star capability, and then there is ISO, which has come up with ISO 27017 and ISO 27018. 17 being for cloud privacy and 18 being for cloud, sorry, 17 is for cloud security and 18 is for cloud privacy. And you could think about that. Let me go over to Shadab. Shadab, in your experience, what do you think? How should organizations adopt these standards? My personal belief is standards should not be driving your organization. You should be trying to standardize the way you work by using these standards to maximum effect. But I'll leave the articulation to you.
Sure, no, exactly right. Compliance and security are two separate things. You're compliant doesn't mean you're secure. You're secure doesn't mean you're compliant, right? Uh, though we should strive for the balance where we have compliance and we have security, right? Before going to talking about specific standards, we need to understand our organization needs compliance in what, like depending if you're dealing with EU citizens, you need to have GDPR. Sorry, if you're dealing with healthcare, you need to have HIPAA. So there are different things, like you need standard or compliance for audit or business process, or for securing data and information, for privacy, for cloud network security, right? Evaluation of a security infrastructure. There are different standards, data governance, right? So you have to figure out what exactly this applies to you, right? And how do we strive for the security and compliance? In terms of compliance across all these buckets, there are multiple, from ISO, COBIT, SSAE, HIPAA, PCI, FedRAM. NIST has, Cloud Security Alliance has, all of them have it, right? We're going to figure out what actually applies to us, and how well are we doing, right? Like I keep giving this example, right? Let's say the pressure cooker that we use to cook our food, right? It's ISI marked. What it signifies is the process to make that pressure cooker was ISI certified, not the pressure cooker itself, right? So these standards help us make sure the process that we set up in our organizations are certified, they have taken care of everything. But the product is our responsibility, which is the actual security implementation, which is different from the compliance and the standard piece of it. Yeah.
You brought out a very important point. So, today everybody talks about ISO certifications. You would see big hoardings and banners that they are either 9001, 27001 certified. The question that every cloud services consumer that must understand or ask is, what part of what you're responsible for is certified for 27001? If we are going to look at that, or 27017. You talk to anybody, and you know how you react to these things is, people say, oh, that service provider, they're certified to everything. They're certified to 27017, ISO certificate of 27001. The latest certification is there. The question is, what part of the shared services responsibilities are certified? And if
Yes.
you understand that, then you understand, how the whole thing works.
Yes.
But let me come to something that's more current. So we've seen a change in cloud services consumption since pre 2020 and post 2020, right? Ever since the pandemic struck, cloud services has been has been going higher. More of consumer consumption of cloud services has gone higher. Netflix and your company as well has been doing quite well, thanks to the fact that people are staying at home. Uh, and before I come to you, the question that I have for Puneet is, while there are laws that an enterprise needs to focus on about cloud security, how does it work with the cloud security providers? Are there enough laws to protect a cloud services provider from, let us say, laws that are cross-border, that have cross-border implications? I mean, if there was a cloud services provider in India and they were hosting information which is covered under GDPR or any other law in any other country, or the vice versa about cloud services provider who's outside India and hosting information within India, there are Indian laws that affect them. How does that whole thing work? What's the right thing to understand from a legal perspective?
See, first of all, cyberspace does not have because it's physical jurisdiction boundaries with respect to law as what we see in regular physical cases. So in cyberspace, since the concept of jurisdiction is actually complicated. For example, let's take an example of a physical offense. Let's say a murder happens. So there are three situations where a jurisdiction arises. So either where the cause of action has happened, that is the site of murder, or where the person or the culprit resides, that can be the nearest police station close to that, can be that jurisdiction. Or if the victim manages to survive it, then the victim in his own jurisdiction, whichever is of his residence, can file a complaint. So let's say there's an attempt to murder. If a murder happens, the cause of action, if it doesn't happen, the person survives the attempt to murder, his residence, and otherwise where the culprit resides. Now, very clear defined things of these are the three situations of jurisdiction. The same thing, once you're going to put it, let's say, into cyberspace, how is it going to happen? So, let's say there is a data breach that happens. A data breach is happening of Mr. Shadab. Shadab is sitting in Mumbai, and his banking information is breached. So, let's just take this example. So, I just hope it never happens to you, Shadab. But just taking the example, you're sitting right here in Mumbai in your residence, and your banking data is breached. So, the cause of action arose over here at your residence, Mumbai. You're the victim out here. However, over here involved were the banking systems and servers which were located in India but taking third-party services located in United States of America. So technically the cause of action could have arisen there also in the event their systems were breached. So we have no clarity out here. Was it your device breached that caused the reason that it should be your jurisdiction, or it should be the bank? Now technically in India how it works is we go by the registered office of the bank. So let's say your bank is SBI, you simply say, oh, they have a registered office in BKC. So that's the jurisdiction. It could be the jurisdiction. Again, the situation may arise where the servers, as I mentioned, are in the United States of America, third-party hostings, etc. Jurisdiction absolutely changes. Let's say the culprit is a Nigerian. A Nigerian person who has committed this particular offense sitting in another country. The jurisdiction again passes on over there. He may have used other zombie devices in committing the attack. Jurisdictions cover all those areas. So how are you going to pinpoint one jurisdiction? Logically. Just asking you, Agnidipta and Shadab, is it even possible? So even for the law enforcement, for that matter of fact, the question of jurisdiction is as complicated as can be. So we may say very clearly, okay, we are going and filing a case in so and so what. But the question of jurisdiction is always a big question. Like I can give multiple examples wherein there are data breaches and we file cases. And where there's a case filed by any victim, the first question we raise is of jurisdiction. Because let's say my organization, they have service providers of so-and-so country. Their servers, let's say, are in Ireland. and the breach happened over there. SPDs approached the court in Ireland, right? So these things are absolutely confusing if you have tried to make it seem logical from a physical crime perspective. So in cyberspace, especially if you're going to talk about cloud security and cloud violations, the biggest issue that you're going to face is of jurisdiction. So as a standard rule, maybe what we can apply, which if accepted by a court upon filing a case, would be wherein the service provider is located or where the cause of action arises. So the service provider also may not be where he's located, may not be where he's storing the data, may not be where he's providing the services, where his purpose may be. But just for the purpose, you can consider it to be his registered office and you can proceed. All this is questionable, it's all debatable. So as I myself gave you the example of Mr. Shadab banking data and the whole plethora of jurisdictions which we can go through and still not come to one. So when you're talking about a cloud service provider having to comply with GDPR and all the regulatory norms, you need to understand that there is nothing protecting him per se. He has to comply. He is a data processor at the end of the day. So a data controller, if breached, anything happening, the data processor is going to be held liable. He will have to compensate for the same. And irrespective of his jurisdiction. So just because a cloud service provider is not in India doesn't mean that Indian law will not apply. It just Indian law also has extraterritorial jurisdiction. So every nation's law has that kind of provision. So by default, he will be pulled into litigation. The question of jurisdiction will definitely be there, but he will be pulled into litigation into multiple nations based on wherever the breach happens.
Thank you. So it seems that the legal aspect of cloud is equally as confusing as the technical aspect of cloud in terms of security and privacy
Yes.
and all those issues. But let me try and declutter a few things. So number one is the shared services responsibility model. One has to understand that, and I don't know who most of our audiences are. If you are a cloud services consumer or planning to be a cloud services consumer, that's your number one go-to document, and do run it through your legal teams and contact the necessary legal expertise so that you understand what Puneet just talked about, jurisdiction or the lack of jurisdiction, and thereby what are your compliance compliance responsibilities when it comes to the data that you're going to store and where you're going to store. The second thing that you must understand from a cloud security perspective is how are you controlling access to the cloud, how are you controlling the data within the cloud, and what are the tools and capabilities that you are able to afford, and therefore what is the residual risk that you are sitting on in the event of a breach. And the third thing that you must look at is, should there be a breach, what needs to be done in what sequence. So your data retention requirements, your business continuity planning, your crisis management planning, and where you are storing data in which country and how are very, very important, especially because cloud security is still transient in its development. There are newer things which are coming to cloud. Soon IoT management will come to the cloud. Some has already come. And the complexity that IoT brings with it is not only the fact that they are technically not standardized like an IP network is. Their communication is variant, but it is still an unknown area when it comes to getting this whole thing in place. Third thing that is coming to cloud is quantum computing, and once that happens, and with the rise, I should say rather now the fall in Bitcoin pricing, uh, that will also evolve, and soon there will be service providers who will come and offer those services. But there are newer technologies that are coming, like blockchain, and probably I don't know how much time we have. Yeah, I think we have almost at the end of our time, and so my input to you is that please take away the fact that understanding the cloud is not difficult. It's easy as long as you keep the compartments clear. What is it that you expect a cloud services provider to do? And what does a cloud service provider expect a cloud services consumer to do? Evangelization of that information is important. Understanding jurisdictions and the legal implications of using the cloud is also important. But the biggest advantage is once you've crossed these boundaries, you have a fair idea how cloud will work and how security and incident response will help you. Using the cloud is a great thing.
And
With
I'll just like to add, sorry, one thing, so people could understand. Like AWS by default is PCI DSS certified, HIPAA certified, and GDPR certified, right? And if I have to launch like my new company in AWS right now, that doesn't mean my company is PCI DSS certified, HIPAA certified, or GDPR certified.
or ISO
I have to
certified.
do network segmentation. I have to implement all of those by myself. Though AWS by default is PCI, all of those certified. So people have to understand, "Acha, it's AWS, it's already certified. Let's just hop onto it." No, it's way different than that, right? Like that evangelization piece is the most important thing where people like to, hey, my responsibility of doing that compliance is gone to AWS now, being one of the providers, right? So these are small things people have to understand. It does helps you, right? It gives you a fast forward track, but then there are things you have to do. You need to do a network segmentation in PCI DSS, access to data, securing the data, encryption. It has given you all those levers, but it doesn't gives you your company if you launch in that service provider is those certified. Like just summarizing of what you're saying would be really for everyone to understand.
Thank you, Shadab, and thank you, Puneet, for being online and talking about this. I know this is a topic which you just cannot finish in
Uh,
35 minutes.
there's one point actually, Agnidipta, I would like to add.
Sure.
With respect to contracts at the time of signing up of cloud services for all the viewers, first of all, there's nothing called a standard form contract. So whether it may be a bank, whether it may be a government service or a cloud service or a cybersecurity service, right? Always negotiate the terms. You can actually make things a lot more easier if you have a clear understanding of what you're signing up. So something as complicated as the jurisdiction, if both the parties agree upon one thing for all disputes, and you can make it very convenient to yourself at that point of time. So you need to ensure that what you sign up for, never leave it being a standard form contract, or just because the service provider says this is my standard form contract, and if you want my services, you accept it. Everything is always open to negotiation. So it's very important for you to take good counsel and negotiate the terms.
Thank you. And with that, I would like to hand the control over to the organizers. Edward, if you guys are online, you want to take over and conclude this session, please?
Thanks, Agni. Thanks, Puneet, and
Yeah.
Edward Media. It was good to be here.
Thank you so much for such an interesting session on cloud security. It is absolute pleasure to have such experienced industry experts like yourselves in your special domains. It could be be it cloud security, or it could be something towards the legal side of cloud. It has been an absolutely fantastic session. We've kind of been able to grab different perspectives. I would really like to thank each and every one of you. And with this, I think we just have one question. Are my applications and data more secure on-prem than on cloud? If any one of you all would like to take
I'll
this.
do that.
Sure,
So
sir.
your applications and your data are as secure on-prem and as insecure on-prem as they are on the cloud. If you have understood what the cloud services provider is offering to give you in terms of the ability to host the applications and the data online and to use tools and technologies to protect it. They are not secure by default. You
Right.
need to secure them as much as you would secure them on-prem. And please use the same rules ideally, secure, because there have been also other instances where people have gone overboard. They've put far more controls on the cloud than they would on-prem, and thereby spend a lot of money to do that. So my input to you, they're as secure or as insecure as in on-prem as on the cloud.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that, right? Let's say you need to have database encryption at rest. Now, on your on-prem, you need to deploy a solution, you need to make sure it's stable, you need to rotate keys, all of that. On cloud, you have a config, you just can just enable it, disable it with just click of a button. Now, on-prem, you have to manage everything which is taken care by the cloud itself. Now, doing database encryption at rest or not is your call, right? Managing all that infrastructure, like now with cloud, the thing that comes is infrastructure as code, right? Infrastructure as platform, platform as code, right? All of those things, IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS schemes, right? So you to understand, cloud helps you to manage things efficiently, far more better, gives you better, clear understanding. But yes, you still have to do it. Nothing is better than the other. You just need to have how you want to work.
Yeah, perfect. I think that gives some insights. Thanks a lot for that. So with this, I would like to end this session. And once again, thanks to each and every one of you for joining this session. And a big thanks to all the esteemed panelists and Mr. Agnidipta for moderating the session.
Thanks.
Thank
It was
you.
a pleasure.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.